Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Janvarasya Yata Nivayad Ita Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadasya Yata Nivayad Itaratas Charte Surabhikya Swarat. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Atsurayaha Tejo Varimridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Chisargom Risha Damnasrena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. He is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, just as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma pujita kaitravotra paramo nirmatsanam padam vidyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapa trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimba Purer Ishwaraha Sadhya Hide Avarudyate Cha Kriti Bhisususabhistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpaturur galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. So today, we are reading chapter 4, text number 1. Vyasuvacha iti bruvanam samstuya muninam dirghasatrinam vidakula pati sutam bhavricha sonako bhavet. On hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Sonaka Muni, who was elderly, learned leader of all the rishis, engaged in a prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. In the meaning of learned men, when there are congratulations or addresses for the speaker, the qualification of the congratulator should be as follows. He must be the leader of the house and an elderly man. He must be vastly learned also. Sonaka Rishi had all these qualifications, and thus he stood up to congratulate Sri Sutta Goswami. When he expressed his desire to present Srimad Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from Sukadeva Goswami, and also realized it personally, Personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. He must have full confidence in the previous acharya, and at the same time he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. The leader of the assembly, Sonika, could estimate the value of the speaker, Sri Sutta Goswami, simply by his uttering yata ditam and yata mati, and therefore he was very glad to congratulate him in ecstasy. No learned man should be willing to hear a person who does not represent the original acharya. So the speaker and the audience were bona fide in this meeting, where Bhagavatam was being recited for the second time. That should be the standard of recitation of Bhagavatam, so that the real purpose can be served without difficulty. Unless this situation is created, Bhagavatam recitation for extraneous purposes is useless labor, both for the speaker and for the audience. So here's some very interesting points made in this purport. Number one, the speaker and the audience both have to be qualified in order to, one, speak the Bhagavatam, and two, hear the Bhagavatam. That is extremely important. We see that usually there are speakers who are not qualified, and equally important, there are audiences that are not qualified. But yet they try and present some spiritual talk. So, the main qualification of the speaker is that he must represent the original acharya, and that is Lord Krishna himself, and repeat the words without finding meanings through secondary and tertiary obscure interpretations of the words. One should stick to the main dictionary meaning of the words, and then the understanding is crystal clear. If one begins to find obscure interpretations or fanciful interpretations, then they deflect the attention away from the real meaning of the text, and they purport some personal agenda so that they can be glorified as having found a new interpretation. There's nothing, let's say, special about a new interpretation. It has to be the original understanding. So no obscure meaning should be screwed out of the text, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. So when Sukadeva Goswami uttered the words yataditam, what does that mean? Huh? Okay. Yataditam yatamati, as far as my realization. Okay. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person, at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. So here, the qualifications of the hearer are given. One must have rapt attention. And this is the main problem, even with devotees, is being able to focus one's attention on what's being said. And that is not always evident. And it says here, a person cannot have rapt attention who's not pure in mind. That means one must not have extraneous thoughts in the mind other than being focused completely 24 hours a day on Krishna consciousness. Any type of diversion will cause a person to be inattentive during class. And then no one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. Well, yeah, one's activities must always be oriented via Krishna consciousness. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. So, we should eat only prasadam. We should not oversleep, not undersleep. 6 hours is recommended. And taking rest early and waking up early, highly recommended. And fearing, well, people have fear because they are not sure what's going to happen in the future. And there are always situations where they may feel fearful. But one who is completely surrendered to Krishna and depends on Krishna for protection becomes abhayam, fearless, because they have complete faith that the Lord will protect them as long as they are following strictly. So when a person is strictly following the principles of Krishna consciousness, they actually become abhayam, fearless, because they're certain of the Lord's protection. And if something seems, let's say, out of the ordinary, the devotee is not, again, fearful, because the devotee is absolutely certain that nothing can happen without the will of the Lord. Therefore, the devotee continues devotional service and patiently waits to see what is the outcome that the Lord has. So that complete faith in the protection of Krishna is important for maintaining steady Krishna consciousness. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Shri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. Now this theme of seeing Lord Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam is repeated many times over in this first canto. Like for example, Narada Muni saw Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj saw Krishna. Dhruva Maharaj saw Krishna. Maharaj Parikshit saw Krishna. You see. So many examples of devotees who have actually seen Krishna in this world. And not necessarily because they were present 5,000 years ago. So this, okay, so where do we see this? If we look, let's see, on 633, so 1633. In the first canto, 6th chapter, 33rd verse, in the purport, Prabhupada says, it says, the absolute personality of Godhead is not different from his transcendental name, form, pastimes, and the sound vibration thereof. As soon as a pure devotee engages himself in the pure devotional service of hearing, chanting, and remembering the name, fame, and activities of the Lord, at once he becomes visible. He, meaning Krishna, becomes visible to the transcendental eyes of the pure devotee by reflecting himself on the mirror of the heart by spiritual television. There you are. First Canto, chapter 6, verse 33. Therefore, a pure devotee who is related with the Lord in loving transcendental service can experience the presence of the Lord at every moment. It is a natural psychology in every individual case that a person likes to hear and enjoy his personal glories enumerated by others. That is a natural instinct. And the Lord, being also an individual personality like others, is not an exception to this psychology, because psychological characteristics visible in the individual souls are but reflections of the same psychology in the absolute Lord. The only difference is that the Lord is the greatest personality of all and absolute in all his affairs. If, therefore, the Lord is attracted by the pure devotee's chanting of his glories, there is nothing astonishing. Since he is absolute, he can appear himself in the picture of his glorification. In the picture of his glorification. The two things being identical. Srila Narada chants the glorification of the Lord not for his personal benefit, but because the glorifications are identical with the Lord. Narada Muni penetrates into the presence of the Lord by the transcendental chanting. So, that is one. And then again, well, anyway, that's the main verse. Primary symptoms of material disease. Yeah, that's the main verse. And then again, that's just echoing what's in the purport here. That one can actually see the Lord in real time by engaging constantly in thinking about the Lord and glorifying the Lord by repeating his pastimes and speaking affectionately and chanting sincerely. Okay. Good. Okay, so now text number 2. Sonaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadeva Goswami. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sutta Goswami is twice addressed herein by Sonaka Goswami out of great joy, because he and the members of the assembly were eager to hear the text of Bhagavatam uttered by Sukadeva Goswami. They were not interested in hearing it from a bogus person who would interpret in his own way to suit his own purpose. Generally, the so-called learned impersonalists who cannot enter into the transcendental personal activities of the Supreme Person. Generally, the so-called Bhagavatam reciters are either professional readers or so-called learned impersonalists who cannot enter into the transcendental personal activities of the Supreme Person. Such impersonalists twist some meanings out of Bhagavatam to suit and support impersonalist views, and the professional readers at once go to the 10th canto to misexplain the most confidential part of the Lord's pastimes. Neither of these reciters are bona fide persons to recite Bhagavatam. Only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Sukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Sukadeva Goswami and his representative are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Well, see, what's happened in modern times is what you would call the deterioration of the educational system. There has to be a qualification of the teacher, and there has to be a qualification of the student. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Both have to be qualified. But today, most teachers are not qualified because they're not pure in hearing, chanting, and reciting, and in their activities. Just like it says, if you don't have a pure mind, you cannot have rapt attention. The speaker's qualification is they give the original meaning of the Bhagavatam without finding or skewing out their own misinterpretations. And then the students have to be qualified. They have to have rapt attention, and that depends on having a pure mind. How can you have a pure mind if it's always focused on social media, television, movies, things like that? It's not possible. One must stay away from those things and just keep focused on Krishna and his transcendental pastimes and the pastimes of his devotees, etc. So, here Prabhupada says, only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Sukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Sukadeva Goswami and his representative are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. So one part, a long time ago, when devotees were first going to Mayapur from the West, and there were still some of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers who were living. In fact, there were still some close relatives of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that were still alive, especially one of his brothers named Lalit Prasad, who was staying in Mayapur. So when devotees went, they also heard that there were such exalted souls like this in Mayapur. And Prabhupada went to see Lalit Prasad with a few of his devotees. And then some other devotees started going to see him. And at one point Prabhupada was a little disappointed. And he made a statement that is always stayed in my mind. He said, even if you hear one word that is different from what your spiritual master is saying, it can cause havoc. Havoc in one's individual spiritual life as well as havoc in our movement, in ISKCON. One word that's different. So, this was a shocking statement. And from that point on, I never thought of going to see any of Prabhupada's godbrothers or anybody. But many devotees did go later on after Prabhupada's disappearance, and it caused havoc in our movement. Now, does that mean these other people are not devotees? No. But there are different levels of acharya. And how do we know? Well, because no one was able to do what Srila Prabhupada did. None of his godbrothers, and no one before him. He was able to spread the movement all over the world. And by strictly following Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instructions. Right? So one instruction Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave was to form a collegial body or a governing body commission to manage the movement after his disappearance. Well, that didn't happen in the Gaudiya Math. They tried a little bit, but it failed. And then they decided, well, everyone can have his own movement. You see. But when Prabhupada came to the United States and started ISKCON, after 1 or 2 years, or 3 years, he formed the governing body commission. to manage the movement, and he trained the devotees to do it. And it's still continuing today, and because of that, ISKCON has been able to achieve marvelous expansion all over the world. And are there mistakes made? Sometimes there are mistakes made, but they're also corrected. And the idea is that Prabhupada wanted to follow strictly his Guru's instructions. So, only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Sukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Sukadeva Goswami and his representative, are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Prabhupada chose to translate the Srimad Bhagavatam and commentary on it, as well as Bhagavad Gita and Nectar of Devotion and Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this is to his full credit, because these are the most important texts in Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Okay. So one word that's askew or is not, let's say, bona fide as far as Srila Prabhupada's presentation of Krishna consciousness, can cause havoc in the whole movement and in the life of the individual devotee. Okay, text number 3. In what period and at what place was this first begun, and why was this taken up? From where did Krishna, and where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Okay. And purport. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is the special contribution of Srila Vyasadeva, there are so many inquiries by the learned Sonaka Muni. It was known to them that Srila Vyasadeva had already explained the text of the Vedas in various ways up to the Mahabharata for the understanding of less intelligent women, Sudras, and fallen members of the family of twice-born men. Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all of them because it has nothing to do with anything mundane. So the inquiries are very intelligent and relevant. So, what differentiates Srimad Bhagavatam from everything else Vyasadeva wrote or compiled? That is the question. And this is what the sages wanted to know when they were questioning Sutta Goswami. And this is what basically Sonaka Rishi is asking. He says, first of all, he says, O Sutta Goswami, you are most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite Bhagavatam. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadeva Goswami. And then he says, in what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Obviously, he got it from his guru, Narada Muni. And this is the chapter. It's all about Narada Muni. So we're hearing the genesis of Srimad Bhagavatam, how it started. And because, obviously, Vyasadeva was feeling forlorn and somewhat doubtful and dejected. And he had an idea why he was feeling like that, but he wasn't sure. So he presented his, let's say, malaise to Narada Muni, his guru, which is correct. Whenever we have a problem, we should always speak to guru or representatives of guru. And Narada Muni explained to him right away that he did not correctly explain who Lord Krishna was. There was information about Lord Krishna, but it was buried in a gigantic avalanche of other information, and it wasn't clear in the minds of people who read the four original, the one Veda that was divided into four by Vyasadeva, and then the philosophical parts of the Vedas called the Upanishads, and then the Puranas, ancient histories, and then the Mahabharata, which is presented for persons who prefer to learn through stories rather than, let's say, intense philosophy, right? And then finally the Vedanta Sutra, which was a mathematical and strict philosophical presentation. But still, it wasn't clear that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I mean, the whole Vedanta Sutra, I don't think Krishna's name is mentioned once. He's always referred to as the Absolute, the Supreme, the infallible, and so forth. But it doesn't mention his name, see? And therefore, Vyasadeva got this confirmation from Narada Muni, and then he wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which he deals only with the subject of Krishna. He doesn't divert into any other subject. But he recounts, or he reiterates many of the philosophical and historical things that he wrote before, but with the special emphasis of its significance to Krishna. So, they want to know, Sonaka Rishi wants to know how this came about. Why did Vyasadeva write the Srimad Bhagavatam after having written so many things? Why did he feel the necessity to write the Srimad Bhagavatam? So text number 4. Vyasadeva's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. So, the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Sukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul, and thus he remained always alert not to be trapped by the illusory energy. In the Bhagavad Gita, this alertness is very lucidly explained. The liberated soul and the conditioned soul have different engagements. The liberated soul is always engaged in a progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul cannot imagine the actual engagements of the liberated soul, while the conditioned soul thus dreams about spiritual engagements. The liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagement of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. A conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually they are differently engaged, and their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or in self-realization. The conditioned soul is absorbed in matter, whereas the liberated soul is completely indifferent to matter. This indifference is explained as follows. Well, this is a very interesting purport. First of all, let's explain what is meant by progressive path. This word progressive is used today also in different contexts, but in this particular context, a progressive path means that for a devotee there's always discovery. The devotee always discovers something new, even though he may be reading the Bhagavad Gita 100 times. Even on the 100th reading, there's something new. Why? Because Krishna reveals himself to the degree that we surrender to him. So the first time someone reads Bhagavad Gita, they might only be surrendered 1%. Second time they read it, it might only be surrendered 2.5%. And the 100th time they read it, after a long period of chanting and following the rules and regulations, then they could be surrendered 50 or 60%. So at that point, they're going to discover things. I mean, it's constantly progressing, their discovery, to the degree that they surrender to Krishna, and then Krishna gradually reveals himself to the devotee. But as you see, when the devotee is completely pure in all his activities, and he can give rapt attention to hearing Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita because of a pure mind and so forth, then the Lord appears in the narrations of his transcendental activities. He appears in the mind of the devotee, or before the eyes of the devotee. It's because the Lord is attracted by the pure devotee's chanting of his glories. There's nothing astonishing. Since he is absolute, he can appear himself in the picture of his glorification, the two things being identical. Srila Narada chants the glorification of the Lord not for his personal benefit, but because the glorifications are identical with the Lord. Narada Muni penetrates into the presence of the Lord by the transcendental chanting. Yeah, well, the glorifications of the Lord are not different than the Lord himself, because of his absolute nature. The name of the Lord is not different than the Lord. So this progressive path, it's not because a person is doing an academic study. It's because of the purification through practical service, regulated and practical service that one is experiencing. And through the service, one is therefore blessed with more and more understanding. Now, another interesting point in this purport is the difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul. They appear to be on the same platform, doing the same work. Like Prabhupada gives the example, two people are street sweepers. One is a devotee, the other is a karmi. But they're doing the same work, right? Just like in your job, right? You're working next to other people all the time, but you may be a devotee, the other person may be a complete nonsense, right? But you're doing the same job. So what marks the differentiation between the two? Well, this is explained also in the verse, Ya nisa sarvabhutanam tasyam jagrati samyaya. Yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisa parshyato mune. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. Like, I'll give you an example. Recently, I was invited to a Christmas party by the Seattle Center, right? Because we're part of the Festival program. And I was thinking, should I go or should I not go? I said, I'm not going to go to that. Because they're going to have liquor. They're going to have maybe beer or wine or something. It's all free. It's all free. But I'm not, and people are basically going to be talking nonsense all night, you know. And it makes me feel, I mean, it's uncomfortable. I mean, I can't, there's nothing I'm going to gain for Krishna consciousness going to the party like that, you know. So other people can go, but I'm not going to go. When I say other people may go to that, but I'm not going to go to it. So this is one difference. Although we may be in the same activity, but the consciousness is different. So Prabhupada explains there are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic men. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure. feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities, undisturbed by material reactions. Now, the materialists, they get really disturbed when things don't go the way they want. But the devotee, even in the most trying situations, remains steady in his or her determination to follow strictly the principles of Krishna consciousness, and their solace, their, let's say, what gives them the strength to remain steady is the transcendental nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so forth. There's absolute nectar, and it's progressive, as we said. As we surrender, as we surrender unto the Lord gives us more and more realizations. Even though we might have read something 100 times, on the 101st time, again we discover something new that we didn't see before. So, this progressive path of Krishna consciousness is an excitement that entices the devotee to come back over and over again. Just like the bee goes back over and over again for pollen from the flowers. And the devotee will go back over and over again to taste more nectar from the same thing that they've read already 100 times. And then next is that the materialists are expert in seeking out sense gratification. But that is of no interest at all to the devotee. The devotee is always seeking out devotional service, transcendental recitations of the glories of the Lord, and chanting the holy name, and preaching Krishna consciousness. This is the difference. Now, if one is in the middle, sometimes they're seeking sense gratification, sometimes they're seeking progressive Krishna consciousness. That middle is like no man's land, because one doesn't taste sense gratification the way the karmis do, with progressive vigor and determination, squeeze out the last drop of sense gratification. And one doesn't taste the nectar of progressive Krishna consciousness. In other words, the progression is stunted, or is an impenetrable obstacle due to the wavering mind, going back and forth, sense gratification, Krishna consciousness, sense gratification, Krishna consciousness. That is a tragic thing. So, text number 5. Are there any questions on, there's a lot of important points in these short purports. Yeah, in the womb of his mother, he had attained bona fide impersonal realization. Right? Huh? Yeah, bona fide. He wasn't a Mayavadi. Yeah. He was a monist, meaning all is one. Right? And therefore, he was not uncomfortable being in the womb of his mother for 16 years because he was not attached to anything material, right? But even he, when he heard his recitation of Bhagavatam by his father, he said, aha, now I have a reason to go out into the material world, because I can recite Bhagavatam, spread the glories of the Lord. Therefore, this verse, Nigama Kapatoror Kalitam Phalam Sukhamukad Amrita Dravya Samyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhur Aho Rasika Bhuvibhavaka. O thoughtful and expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures. It was spoken by Sri Sukadeva Goswami, from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. So Sukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul, but he was not yet a pure devotee. There's a difference. One can attain liberation, but it's not necessarily, that means they rise above the influence of the modes of material nature, and they are not attracted to sense gratification, but they're still not attracted to Krishna. So it's possible to fall down from that position, but it's possible also to advance from that position if one is not a Mayavadi. Now, what's the difference between a bona fide impersonalist and a Mayavadi? Bona fide impersonalist does not say there's nothing beyond Brahman. They say, we don't know. Yeah, but they don't know. But they are ready to hear from their guru, who is willing to make them traverse the next step, go past that's impersonalism to pure devotion. Whereas the Mayavadi insists in a fanatic, irrational way, there's nothing beyond the Brahman. So they remain stunted in their... and what are they saying? They're saying there's no Goloka Vrindavan, there's no Vaikuntha, and God is not a person. It's everything, that when the so-called avatar Krishna comes, he is the tamasa buddhi, the sum total of ignorance. And that in order to attain Brahman, you have to reject Krishna. That's how fanatical they are. That's how crazy they are. So they are not bona fide. They are what you would call errant, wrongly directed persons. But there are such things as bona fide impersonalists who can, like not only Sukadeva Goswami, there was 4 Kumaras. They were able to advance from Brahman realization to Vishnu, servants of Lord Vishnu, right? Because they didn't say there's nothing beyond Brahman. They said we don't know. Yeah. Monists can be progressive. Yeah. They're not closing the door. They say we just don't know, but we're willing to hear, But the Mayavadi, we refuse. They're called Kevala Advaitin, absolute oneness. There's nothing beyond it, right? And they're adamant about it. They're militant and adamant about it. See? And they're the worst aparadis. They will insult Krishna in the worst way. Okay. Good. So now we go to verse number 6. 5. Okay. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son, the sage meaning Vyasadeva, inquired, and young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them made no distinction between male and female, but the sage made such distinctions. Not that he was interested in these young girls, but he's a grihasta, so he has to make a distinction between a male and a female. And but Sukadeva Goswami, he was in this transcendental state where basically all he's seeing is Krishna And when he looks at, maybe he had a slight glance at these ladies, but he was not interested in their bodily forms. He was more interested in Krishna was in their heart. That's why there's a verse, a special verse that says, the devotee does not exactly see a form. The devotee sees either the relation of whatever he's looking at to Krishna, or he sees that Krishna is within it. Let me see if I can find that verse. Savara Shangama. So, Sukadeva Goswami was not interested in the physical aspects of the women's bodies. Okay, I'll have to find this later. No, I didn't find it. We'll come back to it. So, can we be like Sukadeva Goswami? I don't think so. Theoretically, we can. I mean, even if you don't actually see like that, but intellectually you understand, then that is not exactly equal, but it's good. In other words, Lord Chaitanya said, even when I look at the wooden statue of a woman, I become disturbed. So he's giving a lesson to all of us that we should not artificially think that we're on the level of Sukadeva Goswami, right? That we can look at naked women and not notice their bodily features. But we can intellectually understand that I'm not this body, and these whatever I'm looking at is not its body either. This body is a temporary thing. It has actually no, let's say, duration. It's always changing. And whatever appears to be attractive is actually illusory. So you can intellectually understand things and draw your mind away from the attraction. And this, by the way, is one of the goals of Sankhya Yoga. There are 24 fundamental elements, right? The 25th is the soul, the 26th is the super soul. So, whatever you look at, if you can intellectually dissect it, at a certain point you'll lose your attraction to it. Like, for example, let's say there's a very, very beautiful woman, right? Well, if you, let's say that woman was in an accident, serious accident, she's very injured, and they have to do like an open heart surgery. So as soon as the scalpel of the surgeon starts from the neck and goes zip like that, right down the middle, and opens up the skin, the attraction is lost. When the skin is tight, right, there might be some attraction. But as soon as they open it up and you see the guts and the blood and everything, you lose the attraction. And if you keep going down, taking one element and another element out of the equation, and then now you end up with 24 elements, and you've completely lost any attraction you had. So that's one thing about Sankhya Yoga, but who's able to do that? But the whole idea is not to be enamored by a bag of stool, urine, mucus, and so forth. Now, the whole purpose of modern, let's say, fashion and perfumery and jewelry and clothing is to bewilder the mind of whoever's looking. It could be a man or a woman, whoever's looking at the object that's dressed in a certain way with the different accoutrements. You become bewildered by it. You become attracted to it. And there's another interesting point. Now, I'm going to give you something to think about. Now, you see how we dress the deities every day, right? It's very beautiful. Right? Now, if you go to a Catholic church or a Episcopalian church or an Anglican church, they're all the same. The only reason there's Anglican church and then Episcopalian church in the United States is because of Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife and get another wife. And the Catholic Church, and we're going back hundreds of years now. The Catholic Church, the Pope refused to give him permission to do it. So he broke off the Catholic Church in England and started a new church called the Anglican Church, in which they do the same things that the Catholic Church does, but they reject the authority of the Pope. And then he was able to get another wife. and then an offshoot of that is the Episcopalian Church in the United States. So anyway, and I'm going to give you an interesting thought now. Think about this. If you go to a Catholic church, you will see the vestments of the priest. Now, you ever see how they're dressed? Dressed like a deity. And sometimes those clothes are made in India. I'm not kidding you. Very elaborately made clothes. And, there are many different pieces that they have to put on, and there's prayers that they say to put it on. They dress themselves up like deities. See, because they don't have, deities, right? So there's they have an altar, they have pictures. Now, you go to Protestant churches, you don't see any pictures. Right? Because they rejected all that. They thought it was decadent. But the Catholics, they have pictures of their saints, and if you go to the Eastern European Catholic churches, they're extremely ornate. When you come to Western Europe, they're more austere. But Eastern Europe, my God, it's like you'd think you're in an Indian temple. So ornate, very, very ornate. And but the priests are dressed up like deities, and they have those clothing. The clothing they put on is extremely expensive. They say. So you see how the farther west you go, everything is turned upside down. Instead of dressing the deities, they dress the priests. But they dress the priests exactly the way we dress the deities, except they don't have garlands. That's all. But they have everything: the jewelry, the finely tailored and embroidery and gold stitching, everything. Some of those clothes cost mukuts, yeah, right, on the crown. There's a crown, everything. So it's very interesting how things evolve, Okay, so here it says in the Bhagavad Gita 5:18, it is said that a learned sage looks equally on a learned and gentle brahmana, a chandala, dog eater, a dog, or a cow, due to his spiritual vision. Vidyvinaya sampane, brahmane gavi hastane, sunichaiva swapakecha, pandita samadarshana. So pandit is samadarshi, has equal vision. He doesn't see a difference. Why? Because he sees Paramatma and Jivatma. Right? He doesn't see this one is black, this one is Chinese, this one is this, that. He doesn't see those things. That's why I said there's a verse that says when the devotee doesn't exactly see the body of the tree or the dog or the person, he sees either the relationship of that living entity to Krishna, or he sees actually the Paramatma in the heart of the living entity and Jivatma. So Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Thus he did not see a male or female. He saw all living entities in different dress. The ladies who were bathing could understand the mind of a man simply by studying his demeanor. Just as by looking at a child, one can understand how innocent he is. Sukadeva Goswami was a young boy, 16 years old, and therefore all the parts of his body were developed. He was naked also, and so were the ladies, but because Sukadeva Goswami was transcendental to sex relations, he appeared very innocent. The ladies, by their special qualifications, we'll discuss that in a second, could sense this at once, and therefore they were not very concerned about him. But when his father passed, the ladies quickly dressed. The ladies were exactly like his children or grandchildren, yet they reacted to the presence of Vyasadeva according to the social custom, because Srila Vyasadeva played the part of a householder. A householder has to distinguish between a male and female, otherwise he cannot be a householder. One should therefore attempt to know the distinction between body and soul without any attachment for male and female. As long as such distinction is there, one should not try to become a sannyasi like Sukadeva Goswami. At least theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. The outward dress is made of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex and thus keep one entangled in material existence. A liberated soul is above this perverted distinction. He does not distinguish between one living being and another. For him, they are all one and the same spirit. The perfection of this spiritual vision is the liberated stage, and Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Srila Vyasadeva was also in the transcendental stage, but because he was in a householder's life, he did not pretend to be a liberated soul as a matter of custom. Whoa, a lot of points here. You see, Vyasadeva was on the same level as his son, but he maintained the social custom of a grihasta, meaning distinguishing between male and female. So here we see, if this was an ordinary man, a scholar, let's say a Sanskrit scholar, writing a purport to this verse, do you think he would write like this? No. No way. He wouldn't even come close to what Prabhupada has described here. He wouldn't even come close. He would see everything in a rational, mundane way. A rational, mundane way. Like, for example, there was once a man who did not want to die. So he had knowledge. He had some Vedic knowledge, and he knew that Yamaraj is a Paka Brahmana. So what did he do? He decided, very rationally, knowing that Paka Brahmanas are very clean, they never touch stool. So he thought, if I rub my own feces on my body, then I won't die, because Yamaraj won't touch me. You see, this is rational. It was based on Vedic knowledge, right? Yamaraj is a Brahmana. Brahmanas don't touch stool, especially human stool, right? So he thought, I'll just rub my stool on my body every day. That way I won't die. Well, see, this is what they do. This is what the scientists and the grammarians and the rationalists do. They give rational, logical explanations when they write purports. So they would say, well, yeah, Vyasadeva was still, he still had sexual desire. That's why, the ladies were able to use their special qualification to perceive that he was still sexually interested in them. But Sukadeva Goswami, he was not sexually attracted. So they would get half the story right and the other half a complete mess, by using their logic and reason and mundane conceptions of things. So no one would be able to write this purport except a pure devotee. So all the rationalists and the empiricists and the Vedic scholars and so forth, they would mess this purport up completely. Okay. So here we see, Prabhupada says, at least theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. So that's why I said, at least intellectually, we should be able to understand. We might not be able to see like Sukadeva Goswami. We might not be on that level, but at least intellectually, we should understand, or at least theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. The outward dress is made of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex and thus keep one entangled in material existence. Now, yeah, look at all these designer clothing. Right? Designer clothing, designer perfumes, there's designer men's facial lotion, blah, 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 all these things that are coming out, right? So it becomes more and more bizarre to attract either a woman or to attract a man, you know, and they're dressing up in all these different ways. And I mean, you should see the Halloween costumes that people have who are very rich, and especially Hollywood people, their Halloween costumes. You would not believe how much money they spend on it. Unbelievable. And what they look like. They look just like Rakshasas. But they spend, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars looking at. I mean, I could show you, but I don't want to show it's too vulgar. But there was a picture just a day or two ago of these movie stars going to a high-end Halloween party in Hollywood. And they spent thousands and thousands of dollars looking like Rakshasas. I mean, you look at it, you get frightened. You see. So, this is the sickness of modern society. Okay, so for him, or for the person who is a Samadarshi, they are all one and the same spirit. He does not distinguish between one living being and another. For him, they are all one and the same spirit. Now, does that sound Mayavad? A little bit, yeah. But what does he mean, though? So for him, they are all one and the same spirit. That means that Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kamam. That amongst all eternals, Krishna is the supreme eternal because he's maintaining all the other eternals. But we're all eternal. We're all Sat Chitananda Vigraha. Right? We have a form, our spiritual body is the form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Krishna has infinitely great eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and we have minute eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Eternity is eternity, right? But the bliss and the knowledge is not equal to Krishna's bliss and knowledge, right? Except for Radharani, who Krishna perceives as having greater bliss than him. Right? And therefore he appears as Lord Chaitanya to try and understand her bliss. So in any case, one sees with equal vision that all living entities have an eternal soul, an eternal relationship with Krishna. Okay. Now, let's come back to this point that he made, that women have their special qualifications, and therefore these women that were bathing, they could sense that Sukadeva Goswami was very innocent, and therefore they're not very concerned about him. So a woman can perceive if a man has, let's say, indecent way of looking at them, or she's she may be creeped out by the vibration of the man, the way he speaks, or the way he looks, or the way he's looking at them. I remember one time I was traveling in North Africa with a girl, and everywhere we went, Hare Krishna. If we met somebody, like a man, right, he would shake my hand and look at the girl. He wouldn't take his eye off the girl. He said, "Hello, how are you?" Like that. I mean, I don't know what it is, but that's the way it was. So to never travel in North Africa or Muslim countries, like a hippie with a girl and a boy. I mean, it's hellish. It's very dangerous also. So women can perceive that much more than men. Okay. So, any questions? Okay. Text 6, and we'll stop with this. How was he, Srila Sukadeva, the son of Vyasadeva, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapura, now Delhi? After wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded. Well, yeah, even Rishabhadev, he was performing avadut yoga, right, where one does not in any way do anything to maintain himself, and just depends on the mercy of the Lord. If someone gives him food, he'll eat. If no one gives him anything, he'll just fast. If people urinate, he'll walk around naked. If people urinate on him, he doesn't protest. If people strike him with a rock or a stone, he doesn't protest. So it appears as if that such a person is dumb and retarded, and crazy. Purport. The present city of Delhi was formerly known as Hastinapura because it was first established by King Hasti. Goswami Sukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it was very difficult for the citizens to recognize him in his exalted position. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Sukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly he appeared to be a retarded, dumb man, but in fact he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Well, no one should ever try and imitate this. And there are people that try and imitate this. But we should learn that one recognizes a person by hearing, not by seeing. So one can be really nicely dressed and have all credentials, Harvard graduate, Stanford PhD, but so forth, and speak very nicely, use good language, But if what they say is nonsense, then you can tell that person is a low-class person, even though they look first class. And one might not be so well dressed, one might not be so handsome, and so forth, but they speak lovingly and correctly about Krishna, then you can understand they're a very elevated soul. However, you have to be trained to be able to recognize if they're speaking correctly. Because if you're not trained in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, a person can say things that sound perfectly right and be perfectly wrong. some people have that skill to say things in such a way that it sounds perfectly right, but actually it's nonsense. So if we don't know Bhagavad Gita, at least Bhagavad Gita we have to know. If we don't know Bhagavad Gita, we can be easily fooled by very clever rascals. Like, for example, in, I think it was 1893, that Vivekananda went to Chicago to the World Religion Conference and gave a speech. The speech he gave was absolutely brilliant and very eloquent. He gave many speeches, but he gave one main speech, but he gave other speeches. He was very expert. He knew the philosophy of the Vedas, but he was a downright Mayavadi. He was a Mayavadi, 100%, very, very intelligent man. Spoke excellent English and was brilliant. He was a brilliant guy, but he's a nonsense. What he spoke was nonsense. But he said it in such a clever and intellectual way that, you know, even if you know he's a nonsense, you're still impressed by his presentation because he was so elevated in the way he was speaking. Right? And he mesmerized. There were a bunch of Christians who were very upset with him because they could see through him. But most people were just mesmerized by him. You know. And the Hindus are still mesmerized by him today. But he was a very, very clever Mayavadi. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read his speech. I read it, and I couldn't believe it. You know, I would like to have heard him because I'm not sure. I don't think they recorded it. I'm not sure. It's recorded? Yeah. Have you ever heard it speak? Huh? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, but the guy is a Mayavadi and a fanatical Mayavadi, right? But he said things in such a way that, you know, if you're not trained in Krishna consciousness, you would think, you know, he's the most bona fide person in the world. You know? So we have to be trained ourselves in Bhagavad Gita at least. Otherwise, it's very easy for us to be misled. Very, very easy. Because never underestimate the Mayavadis. Most of them know Sanskrit much better than any of us. Right? And in fact, there was one Sanskrit scholar, not Professor Stahl, but another one. Huh? No, one professor that really challenged one of Prabhupada's disciples. I think it was Brahmananda. And he was confused, and when he presented it to Prabhupada wrote a letter back and completely blasted this guy. Completely blasted. In fact, I'll find it. I have to pull it up. Prabhupada was so heavy with him because he bewildered his disciple. He bewildered his disciple. And Prabhupada was really upset with the way he did it. And in his letter, he blasted him. He deflated him down from a big elephant to a mosquito. You know, and because that is a very, very nasty thing to do, to try and bewilder a disciple. You know. Okay, so one should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Sukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. Now, this is a very important point. Speaking on the transcendental activities of the Lord is a great benediction. It's not an ordinary thing to be able to do that. Sukadeva Goswami was able to do it. And Bhagavatam is full of transcendental, beautiful, let's say, prayers by pure devotees. Like, soon we'll read the prayers of Queen Kunti, but that's only one. There are many, many long and let's say elaborate prayers by devotees. Like, after Indra is defeated, he speaks absolute truth about Krishna, right? And Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj and all these great devotees, Lord Shiva himself, and they're all glorifying the Lord. Those prayers we should read regularly and recite them and meditate on them, because then you will see Krishna present in the glorification, in his glorification. Then you actually see him, because they correctly characterize Krishna and glorify Krishna's transcendental qualities. There's no mistake in their prayers. That's why Srimad Bhagavatam is called Amala Purana. There's no mistake. There's no imperfection. It's all perfect. So Sukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was not in the entertainment business. Right? He was not an inspirational speaker, like in a sense of telling people what they want to hear. He was strictly adherent to glorifying the Lord, Krishna's transcendental pastime. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. So that's Vivekananda. His speech is jugglery like a magician, but he's a great magician, no doubt about it. Outwardly, he appeared to be a retarded, dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Okay. Is there any questions, comments? These are not long purports. They're all short purports, but they have a lot of very pertinent points. It's not Parikshit Maharaj. It's Sonaka Rishi. Yeah. Okay. What was your question? Well, first of all, they are hearing from Sutta Goswami, not from Sukadeva Goswami. But they know the history, so they want to hear how, why did Vyasadeva write the Srimad Bhagavatam? And if you want to know the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam, you have to know about Sukadeva Goswami, because he's the first person who repeated it. Vyasadeva is the first person who wrote it and spoke it to his son. But his son is Sukadeva Goswami, is the one that expanded it. Not only, so I'm not, even myself, I'm not really clear on what he heard in the womb. Did he hear the 4 nutshell verses, or did he hear more than that? But I know one thing, Sukadeva Goswami expanded it, because I've heard Prabhupada say that. Right. And then Sutta Goswami was present when Sukadeva Goswami spoke it, and then he repeated it. He's the third repetition, right? So Sonaka Rishi, who's head of the sages in Naimisharanya, he wants to, he's asking, tell me, a little bit about the story of this Bhagavatam. Why did Vyasadeva write it? So now, it's Sutta Goswami is talking about Sukadeva Goswami. Okay? So sometimes people get confused, So there's 3 S's, like Sukadeva Goswami, Sutta Goswami, Sonaka Rishi.
Narada Muni is able to come. So Sukadeva Goswami is the one who is talking about all the devotees of the Lord. How come that they all promoted in being that Sukadeva Goswami is the first to do that rather than Vyasdev or Narada Muni? So once that this story was known to everybody that Sukadeva Goswami is the one who would be the most sectarian, that's where I just would like to know.
Well, you have to wait till we go through this chapter. That's going to be explained. But obviously, one qualification that's mentioned already is that he is Samadarshi. He does not see the body of people. He sees the relationship to Krishna. He doesn't see male or female. He sees everyone is the servant of Krishna. So he's on the position of a Mahabhagavata. You see. So to be an effective preacher, like Vyasadeva, you have to come down a little bit to Madhyama Adhikari, where you see differentiations, right? This is God, this is a servant of God, this is an innocent, ignorant person, this is a demon. Right? So Vyasadeva, although he's completely self-realized and he's Samadarshi, but yet he's acting on the level of a Grihastha. Right? So he sees male and female. Sukadeva Goswami is on the Mahabhagavat level. He's not seeing male or female. He's just seeing Krishna, wherever he looks at. So he was recognized like that by the sages. Yeah. Yeah, he's also a Mahajan. Yeah. Yeah. So we will find out more about Sukadeva Goswami as we go through this, because Sutta Goswami is explaining about Sukadeva Goswami. So you'll see his exceptional qualifications. That's a good question. Any other questions? What? Say it louder so everyone can hear. Well, that means that they seem to be silent, right? Just like Rishabhadev, not Rishabhadev, but Maharaj Bharata, when he became Jad Bharat, he didn't speak. So that's called dumb, when you don't speak. But the one time he did speak, King Rahugana recognized this guy's a pure devotee. He surrendered to him. So dumb usually means that you can't speak. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just means you don't speak. Yeah. So when it says retarded, dumb, madman, so retarded means even if you do speak, it's all nonsense. And dumb means you don't speak. And madman means you're a crazy guy. So anybody's walking around naked, not speaking, right? And therefore, or he's just chanting Hare Krishna. So people think he's a crazy guy, and he's retarded because he should have gone to school and become Microsoft certified, But instead, he's walking around naked and he's gibberishing this Hare Krishna. Yeah, they can't recognize. Clothes don't make the man, they say in English, right? So if you have no clothes on, then people think you're crazy. Right. Yeah, so Rishabdev also, he's walking around naked. People thought he was crazy. Well, he was doing things that people didn't understand. The devotees understood, but other people didn't understand. And they misinterpreted. Well, it's the opinion of ignorant people. Yeah, exactly. Well, we have to, again, you recognize a person by the way they speak. Prabhupada says this also in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I think it's the 4th chapter. That the most important quality of a person is the way they speak. And when a dumb person remains silent, you can't recognize them. They might be well dressed, but they're remaining silent, so you think, oh, they must be, a very good person. But as soon as they speak, you can tell this person's nonsense. He's talking complete nonsense, right? So we have to recognize a person by the way they speak. Like, for example, sometimes people speak nicely, but what they're saying is nonsense. But they're saying it in a nice way. Like Deepak Chopra, when he speaks, he's a very good speaker, but everything he's saying is nonsense. Okay. What is that person? Maybe. Anyway, the first quality by which you can recognize a person is the way they speak. Let's see if I can find that verse. Any other question? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. You had your hand up. Yeah. Yes.
Introduces spiritual life, or whether he's like somebody preaches to him, or whether he's inquisitive. Anyway, he comes to spiritual life. So at that time, he has no understanding what is the personal, what is the impersonal, what is the Mayavadi or not. We also say that as the living entity desires, Krishna reveals himself to the person. But at the same time, we also say like...
As one surrenders, proportionately, Krishna reveals himself.
Then whenever...
As he desires.
So whenever the living entity tries to go through a spiritual life, on what basis does he or she ends up in a different spiritual path? Because we also say people are ending on a cheating religion because they have that propensity. But somebody who's going for spiritual life, he is not thinking, oh, I don't want a proper life, I want a cheating life. So on what basis does the living entity ends up in a different spiritual path? Some of them are right, some of them are wrong. Because when he's going for that direction, he's not really looking to cheat himself, he's looking for something better. So how does living entity ends up on that? Is that why would a person choose? Because when he's choosing, he has no idea what he's choosing. So how does, at the same time, he says that you take a one step towards Krishna or Lord, and he helps you up. So why would nobody would like to go for something cheating? Then how come they do end up in those directions?
Why do you say no one would go after cheating? Why you say?
I'm going to say
then you always go after cheating.
I'm going to say if you are...
But you'll surrender to a bigger cheater than you are.
No, I think his question is, they probably don't know they are cheating or whatever. They were looking for a spiritual path, but how did they end up in a wrong path? From what we consider the wrong path.
No, because they have the cheating propensity.
But they consider themselves honest. They don't know, they're probably as honest as a not ordinary citizen is.
But you're making many assumptions.
Yeah.
You have to recognize the mentality of a person. Like, for example, I met this one man, right? And I told him that He was doing this type of charitable work, that type of charitable. And, and he happened to be a real estate agent. So he said, oh, yeah, I would, I like to donate to these type of causes, I want to talk to you some more. I thought he was interested, So, well, I had called him because he was a real estate agent, and he had put some property on, advertised a property, and I called him up to find out about that property. But then he was a very, very clever guy, so he invited me to his house to talk about the property. But when we got to talking, I started explaining. He asked me a few questions about myself, and I started explaining all the things that I do, and he seemed to be really excited and interested in it. And he started saying things like, well, I could easily give you a property, and you could develop it for this thing or that thing for your program. So I thought he was serious, right? But in subsequent meetings with him, he was not really interested in giving anything. He just wanted me to buy a property. But it took a little while for him to reveal his real purpose. Right? So sometimes you can meet people and they're very, they seem to be very sincere and so forth, but over time you can realize their real motives. So you can't paint with a broad brush that all people are looking for the truth and they're honest, and how come they get misled? Why doesn't Krishna, reveal to them the real truth, and why can't they follow? They don't want to be cheated by cheaters. That's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true. Everybody, look, what does Prabhupada say here? He says, there's two types of people. There are people who are expert in sense gratification, and people who are expert in Krishna consciousness. Right? So the ones that are expert in sense gratification, it doesn't mean they're stupid people. They're very smart. They're very educated, some of them. And they know how to speak, and they understand psychology and things like that. So it takes time to realize the real motivations of a person. You can't, if you're a real expert, you can tell rather quickly, but sometimes you can't tell right away. But over time, the truth will come out about a person's motivations. So you should not paint with a broad brush. Nobody wants to be cheated. Everyone's looking for the supreme truth. And how come, some people get misled? But because they have that tendency of material desire. Why do people come to Krishna? 4 reasons. One, they're in misery. 2, they want to find out some way of becoming rich, making money. And 3, they're just curious. And 4, they're really looking for the truth. So those are all 4 material reasons why people come to Krishna. They're not pure motivations. And sometimes people come to Krishna consciousness because they want to find out a way of, getting a green card and coming to America, right? And once they come to America and once they get their green card, well, off they go, driving a taxi or working in a gas station or who knows what, starting a non-profit, International Society for Ajay so-and-so. So you don't know, you cannot paint with a broad brush that everyone is sincere. And if they have that material tendency, then they'll be attracted to someone who's promising them material, let's say success. Okay? So you have to go inside yourself and analyze what your motives are in life. What do you want? There are actually very few people that really want the truth. Very few. However, you can be purified by associating with genuine devotees. Yes?
Just to then kind of connect the dots that, because the Paramatma in their heart knows the actual desire of the person, so then they will be guided to either the
Well, that's, see, if you look in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it says, Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta swadayarchitam ichati.
It's the 722, 722, I think, 722.
Huh?
721, 720.
Yeah. And it says, I am in everyone's heart as a supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. You see? So let's see what it says. God has given him independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facilities to such persons. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. Some may ask, why the all-powerful God gives facilities to the living entities for enjoying this material world and so lets them fall into the trap of the illusory energy? The answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Supersoul does not give such facilities, then there's no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes, but his ultimate instruction we find in Bhagavad Gita, one should give up all other engagements and fully surrender it to him. That will make man happy. So this answers your question, does it not? Therefore, we have to always analyze our motives. If we have some impure motive, that could lead us to becoming attracted by a person who has impure motives. So Prabhupada answered the question. Why would the Supersoul or God direct someone to a demigod to get material facilities? If he didn't do that, and he made us all like robots, then there wouldn't be any limited independence. There wouldn't be any love. Love. Does a robot love someone? No. You have to have independence. Some independence. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. And so next week we'll continue